Hi, Ilan.
Nice to see you again, Frank. Thank you.
Same. Last time we spoke was now about, it was just like maybe 3 weeks ago. And we talked about what had pretty much just happened, October 7th. Let's call it October 7th. Since then, a lot more has happened, of course. But I titled our video, our conversation, There is Still Time to Stop the Gaza Genocide.
Mm-hmm.
Nearly 3 weeks later, the Gaza genocide is still ongoing, despite millions in the streets. If you had all the cities, London yesterday was close to 1 million. I was in Brussels, it was close to 50,000. There was demonstration in South Africa, in Berlin, all over the world. So I just wanted to start by sort of, where do we go from now? Like, is popular pressure enough to stop the genocide continuing?
Well, definitely this amazing show of solidarity has some impact. I think the French president probably responded somewhat to this pressure when he was the first leader in the West calling for a ceasefire and not just for humanitarian corridor. But it seems that this is not enough. And I think that, and I don't have a magic formula, but I'm afraid that despite the impressive display of solidarity, we need more in order to to stop the genocide. Because I listened yesterday to the Israeli trio that are running this genocidal operation, Netanyahu, Gallant, and Gantz. And it's very clear that they are like in a rabbit tunnel. They hear some of the voices from the outside, but they think that the only voice that counts is that of the American president. And even that voice, it was very clear from what they were talking about, is not entirely effective if it will totally negate what the Israelis want to achieve on the ground. So, I think we need maybe a wider coalitions between anyone who is willing to be part of the pressure to stop the genocide. This is a very different coalition from the one that we usually have, and we will continue to have, to decolonize Palestine, to free Palestine. I think people are making a mistake that the usual coalition that is working very well, the BDS and so on, which is a slow process that I think one day will mature and will help change the reality on the ground. And there's a different history with that kind of coalition and an emergency coalition, that you want to stop a crime that is happening. And in emergency coalition, you have to be less purist in who your allies are. You do need to talk to politicians, even if you don't like them, and I don't like them. And you have to pressure your foreign ministry, and you have to pressure your members of parliament. It is true that for the longer period, they are not very reliable allies in the decolonization. But this is not now about the decolonization. This is not about the day after. This is about today. Every 10 minutes, a child is being killed by the Israelis in Gaza. The food and water is running out, and the Israelis are determined to continue this for the next 3 or 4 weeks, which might be too late for all of us. I think that, and with this I will finish a longer answer that I planned. I think that what you learn from history, that the unimaginable can become reality. I don't think we can imagine what the next stages of the genocide can look like, because you feel like, okay, you've seen it, you understand what it is. No, it can be much, much worse. And I think that is where I would like to hear, people thinking out of the box, but most importantly, creating these tactical alliances, first and foremost, to stop the genocide. This is not about the solution of the day after.
Thanks, Ilan. Yeah, I think we've seen, in a way, like we've seen some of it already, and I think this is great. And for example, like the campaign led by sort of Hollywood actors,
Exactly.
artists for a ceasefire. We know, for example, the letter that they signed. If we were to write it, if we were to say exactly what we wanted to say, would have been a lot more political and radical. But we knew that to get to some of the people, you have to start, it's like, I think sometimes people forget that the struggle is a long and draining process, right? It doesn't happen in a click. And you build, it's like you build a house that maybe it's going to take 20, 30, 40 years to build, but it's one brick at a time, right?
And not only talking to those who are already with you. I mean, I participate every second day in webinars, and most of them are great webinars, really. And the people who join me on the panels are the best, really. But we're talking to the convinced. Those people don't need me to tell them that they should do all they can to stop it. They're doing it, even without my webinar. They're doing it. I'm looking for ways, kind of expanding the conversation to not to people who are lost cases, kind of total Zionists or pro-Israelis, but the world is not made just of these two groups, pro-Zionists and pro-Palestinians. There's also a group in the middle, and that group sometimes is even more represented in the political and economic elites than the other two groups. And maybe we can try and build even a better rapprochement with them again. And I fully understand the reluctance of some people to do it, because usually on other agendas, these people are not reliable allies. But as I say, this is emergency. This is really genuinely an emergency. I wonder whether people understand how drastic the situation on the ground is.
And I mean, I think we already see what popular pressure can do, because Macron, about a week ago, or maybe 10 days ago, told Netanyahu, if you want me to help defeat Hamas the way we helped defeat ISIS, I'll send you weapons. I'll send you a big, the Navy and stuff. And when was it? On Friday or Saturday, Macron said, there's too many civilians' death. Netanyahu's got to stop. So I'm convinced that this is only down to popular pressure, because we know these people are pragmatists, right? Macron wants to be reelected. He doesn't care about anything else. So what was the reaction, by the way? Because I heard Netanyahu react to Macron's speech. What was the reaction? What do you make of it?
Yes, the reaction in Israel was outrage and anger, because they thought that Macron, like any other leaders in the West, gave them a carte blanche to do what they want on the ground. And suddenly you understand that, and I agree with you, I think these are electoral consideration rather than a moral epiphany. But nonetheless, the Israelis are now, or the consensus mood in the Israeli media, which is totally recruited to the government and is much more a propaganda agency now than a real independent press. They are now drawing again the lines of anti-Semitism, and they are just condemning anyone who makes these tame remarks, like Macron or the Secretary General of the United Nations, as bordering on anti-Semitism, that they're not willing to have any constructive conversation with them. But I think if there will be more leaders in the West who would adopt at least that position, it will have an impact. It will have an impact on Israel eventually. And I think that we should hope that this will happen. And I'm looking at the more progressive wing of the Democratic Party in America. I don't think they're doing enough. I think they are finding difficult at the right moment to get rid of their Zionist inclinations. Liberal Zionism is not very helpful at this given moment. And they don't know exactly what to do. And maybe we can talk a little bit about it later, because this is also reflective of the position of Haaretz, the main mouthpiece of liberal Zionism in Israel. They have never found themselves in that position, that they are irrelevant unless either they totally support Israel or they totally support the liberation movement. They thought that there was a middle ground, which is called liberal Zionism. And in a situation like we are facing today, it doesn't work to be a liberal colonizer or, you know, progressive genocider. And these are the groups I'm talking about when I think they're not lost cases, but hopefully they will be part of the alliance in the very, very near future.
Yes, we go back to, in a way, like you cannot be neutral in situation like these, right? You've got to make a choice. You know, where do you stand? And what the progressive Zionists or whatever liberals are doing is that, you know, they condemn a little bit this way and a little bit this way, but they don't make the right stand. I wanted to also go back to what is Netanyahu, what is the sort of Israeli government army trying to do? We've learned that very, very shortly after October 7th, Hamas told Netanyahu, in exchange of a 4 days ceasefire, we're ready to release a lot of hostages. Mm-hmm. Netanyahu refused. A few weeks later, Hamas again, because, I mean, we can talk about this again. Israel says Hamas is Daesh, you know, they're monsters. We're not talking to monsters. We obviously know that in the background, via Qatar, they are talking to each other, you know. That's right. But so a few weeks later, Hamas once again told Netanyahu, not in exchange of a ceasefire for like a 4 or 5 days ceasefire, they release more hostages. He refused again. For me, this is mad, and it shows what his intent is. And, you know, can you talk about this? And can you talk maybe about the reaction in Israel? I cannot imagine the families of hostages that now know that their kids and daughters and grandfathers could have been released maybe 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. First of all, Netanyahu, I think that he needs a long war because he has not yet worked out the strategy of his political survival after the war. And as long as the war continues, he's not in danger in losing his seat. So I think for him, a prolonged military operation gives him more time to prepare the propaganda for the day after, not in terms of what to do with Gaza, but in terms of what to do with his own career. It's very, very clear that he's pushing for a continuation of intensive fighting because it serves his political career very well. As for the army, I think that they, at first, they were genuinely at the beginning, were thinking of how do we balance our wish to release all the hostages and fulfill the directive from the government, so-called, to destroy the Hamas. I think, and I say it very carefully because I know some of the families, and it's terrible to say this, but I think the release of the hostages dropped in the priority list of the Israeli army. You don't have to be a military expert to understand that this is the situation, because, you know, it's just common sense. If you say that the priority is to release the hostages, you can afford not only 3 days of ceasefire, you can afford 7 days of ceasefire. If you don't do that, it means that you are not prioritizing it. I mean, they play with words. They say that, in fact, the military pressure is actually helping to salvage the hostages because they succeeded in one operation to salvage one hostage, which is ridiculous in a way. Now, I think that because of the pressure of the families, they are leaving open the channel to Qatar and Egypt in order to find out about an exchange deal. But it's not the first time in Israel's history that one action contradicts the other action. I mean, we don't have to be surprised that one action is actually contrary to the other action. I mean, this is very typical to Israeli tactics and strategy. And what really matters in the end of the day is the fact that the trio I mentioned is the one taking the decisions. And they seem to be in a consensus that dropped, as I said, the hostages to a lower place in the priority list. I'm not saying that it's not possible that sooner than later they will maybe go into an exchange deal. But I don't understand the families, I must say. I've seen the demonstration in Tel Aviv. It was very tame. And it was very limited in its effective pressure on the Israeli government. I mean, if these members of the family want their people back, they should learn from the Gilad Shalit family when they really put pressure on the government. I don't know why they're doing. Maybe the numbers are so huge that it's difficult, first of all, to find a consensus among the families. They come from different walks of life, different political persuasions, and so on. But they begin to realize what I'm saying. You can hear some of them are saying. The question is, how far would they go in translating into action what they're saying? They say that the army betrayed them, and now the government betrays them. But what do you do when you are betrayed like this? So it's a matrix of power. People are pressuring here, pressuring there. But what matters, to my mind, is what happens on the ground in Gaza. For the time being, what matters is what's happening on the ground in Gaza much more than the back channel negotiations. And that's why we don't see any tangible results yet for these negotiations. Only rumors and ideas, but we're not very close to anything practical. It might change. I hope it will change, of course, but not as far as the people who are running the show from the Israeli side, the real policymakers, those who matter. They are very ruthless, not only towards Palestinians, but also towards their own citizens.
I also want you to talk about something that is kind of invisible right now, at least in the mainstream media, is because all the eyes are on Gaza, and obviously it's necessary to focus on Gaza right now, but it's the repression faced by Palestinians, both in the West Bank and in Israel itself, 48, simply for posting things on social media, on Facebook, for taking a stand in a way against the massacre. I've heard many stories, including of friends that have been arrested, rounded up. Can you talk to us a bit about this?
Definitely. What is happening is the fact that the settlers who are members of the cabinet, especially the Minister for National Security and his ilk, are excluded from running the operation in Gaza. That's very clear. They're not invited to the meetings. Nobody consults them. So they looked for something else, and nobody stops them to be the ones who determine the policy towards the Palestinians in the West Bank and inside Israel. In fact, they have now more free hand in doing that than they had before the 7th of October. And the result is that these fanatic settler politicians are fulfilling their wildest dreams of how the police and the border police and the army and the settlers should act in tandem in order to change facts on the ground in the West Bank and inside Israel. So in the West Bank, what they began to do is to send messages to the settlers that there are now no inhibitions. And the settlers already expelled 8,000 Palestinians from their homes while the army was standing by. In the past, this happened, but not in such magnitude, not on such numbers. Secondly, the way they prevent Palestinians from picking up olive or participating in the olive harvest, again, of course, it was done before, but never in such brutality where settlers have the license to shoot Palestinians who pick olives and so on. And of course, the mass arrests, the mass demolition of houses, and the constant use of air power against urban spaces in the West Bank. Now, this all is something that the extreme right in the government demanded before the 7th of October, but was not given. And now they have the space. And this, I think that's the agreement between them and the trio. The trio said, you're too crazy. We need the one to be the ones who do the Gaza thing, and even the North, but you can have a free hand in the West Bank. Similarly, inside Israel, you have police commanders who are cowards. I don't think they agree with everything, but they are cowards. They understand that suddenly this minister of national security has become powerful again, so they don't dare to challenge him. And it is his dream to arrest anyone who tweets or talks in Facebook and so on in mass numbers and for longer periods of arrest, and to terrorize the Palestinian community inside Israel. Of course, he has another ulterior motive. He really hopes that this would create what he would call a second May 2021 events. He really wants it. He wants a Palestinian, Arab Jewish, if you want, a small civil war inside Israel. This is because that would prove all that he said about the Palestinian citizens. So he's really pushing them and provoking them. So far, he didn't succeed, but he's trying all his best to do that. By the way, in brackets, we should say there are some. There's an interesting case now in Petah Tikva of quite a famous person. Some of us know him personally, of a history high school teacher, a Jewish history high school teacher, that mentioned to his student the context of the Hamas. That's all he did, the context. And he's now in jail for treason. It is on the one hand ridiculous, but on the other hand, it means that the Israelis are destroying themselves, the little that was still left on their whatever was left of their democracy or ability to criticize. So yes, I think that this should be mentioned in the world as well, because it's an integral part of something we talked about in our early conversation, when I said to you, if I remember correctly, unfortunately, as horrific as these events are, they're not a game changer, unfortunately. Namely, the same things are happening as they were happening in the last 75 years. It's a different magnitudes, it's a different cruelty, but it's the same. And the question is, will it be the same afterwards? But, you know, ethnic cleansing in the West Bank, discrimination against the Palestinians in Israel, and genocidal policies against the Gaza Strip happened before. And this is why we are actually still within the same situation, which demands regional and international intervention, because the Palestinians don't have the power to stop it by themselves.
Thanks, Ilan. Finally, I'm wondering, like, when we spoke again a few weeks ago, you said this is not going to be like an ethnic cleansing in a way, the way, in a way, for Hiroshima was. You know, you drop a massive bomb, you kill everyone, and then you said it's going to be an incremental ethnic cleansing, incremental war. This is going to last. It's not going to last only a few days. This is going to last longer. you've been proven right. So I've been talking, obviously you've been talking, everyone's been talking to many friends, many different opinions. A friend of mine told me this is going to be like 82 in Lebanon. Israel really, really intends to get rid of Hamas, whatever it means. They want to push them away from Gaza, however long it's going to take. So this is going to last potentially for months. Where do you place yourself? What do you? I mean, I know it's not easy to plan the future, but what do you think?
Again, I don't know if it's weeks or months, but I do agree. First of all, it's a long operation. It's a longer operation, and the resistance of the Hamas is a genuine resistance to the last man. So it really means that they won't succeed in implementing their plan until they really either kill everyone, expel everyone, and I'm talking about the fighters, expel them, kill them, or capture them. Because I don't see any, in the near future, any moment when, suddenly the leadership of the Hamas said, okay, we're putting the white flag, so to speak, and we're getting out of the tunnels and so on. There is a willingness to sacrifice yourself, and that's why this is also a factor we have to take into account. Now, the Hamas still hopes, and I wonder whether they're right or not, and I cannot predict that. The Hamas is also building on the assumption that the longer it takes, the heavier the pressure on Hezbollah in the north to interfere, the pressure on the Arab countries that normalized relationship with Israel to rethink the normalization. Again, I don't say they're wrong, but I can't say they're right either. I don't know. I think nobody knows. And Frank, the reason nobody knows is that I think Nasrallah and Iran themselves don't know yet what they will do. They really don't know yet. It's very clear from the way they act. So it's a recipe not only for a long incremental genocide. I mean, ethnic cleansing is already not incremental in Gaza. It's quite the numbers are higher than during the Nakba, 48 now. But the genocidal operations are incremental. But it's also a recipe for Israel being unable to contain it in the Gaza Strip. This is something that can, and with this I will end, it can play in both directions. On the one hand, the opening of other fronts in the north, a proper uprising which hasn't happened yet in the West Bank, maybe more fighting on the Syrian border, drastic actions by Jordan and Egypt who would have to respond to their public opinion, could force America to take a tougher position on Israel, because it doesn't serve American interest. A Middle East like this doesn't serve American interest, that's for sure. So that's one positive thing that can come out of it. The negative aspect is that these things are very, very precarious. Nobody really can control them. They can get out of hand. And then you have bombing of Beirut, and then you have an American reluctant even involvement, military involvement, and that really turns the whole area pushes it into a turmoil that would have impact beyond the Middle East and so on. I just wonder whether these advisors to Biden, who are graduates of Harvard and Yale and so on, the people, educated people who've seen things, understand what they're playing with. And I would probably not expect much of them had we not been there in 2003. I just wonder where's the process of learning. I was interviewed in Al Jazeera, and someone asked me, do you think the Israelis learned something from the past? And I said, no, I don't think they have. But I don't think the Americans and the Europeans have learned either. And this is where I'm very worried. So I think it's a long process, and it would be very dangerous to predict exactly. And probably we should all invest our efforts as we began our conversation, Frank, at least in pushing for a ceasefire. And then you always hope that out of the ceasefire, maybe something more substantial will develop in terms of thinking about stabilizing the situation in the future. But we're not there anyway, so we should concentrate on the ceasefire at this very moment, I think.
Thank you, Ilan.
Thank you, Frank.
As always, whatever these conversations are doing, I just hope that if it planting seeds, I guess, right? And trying for
And I hope my bad predictions are not correct, but usually my bad predictions are correct, and my positive ones turn out to be too optimistic. I hope it will be one day the other way around.
Let's hope your legacy will be, he was wrong.
Yeah, I'm very happy
on this one.
On this one, I was very happy to say that. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Frank. Thank you very much. Thank you. All the best.